Okay. So thank you all for joining. We already have 75 participants on this call, which is really exciting. I'd like to introduce Dave Billeter, CEO and co-founder of Deep Lens. Thank you for joining us,
Hello,
Dave.
everyone.
And as more people are joining, why don't you give us your elevator pitch? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what Deep Lens does.
Sure. I'll start with a little bit more of a background about myself. So, from Ohio, actually from Northwest Ohio, the home of Rev One's own Parker McDonald in Lima, Ohio. So, lived there, went to school not far from Lima at Ohio Northern University. And that, following my graduation there, moved to Columbus, ended up getting my master's degree. And this is, Columbus, I've called home now for aged myself over 20 years. So, it's a great environment. And then I've been in the IT, life sciences, and healthcare environment for a number of years. At Nationwide Children's Hospital, where I worked for, almost 11 years as a director of informatics there. Also did another startup with a company called Signet Excel, and then transitioned from there and ran data monetization at Cardinal Health here in town. And that all led me to starting Deep Lens. And Deep Lens as a company, we and our technology, our Viper platform, we provide the most precise and timely solution to match patients with the right clinical trial at the right time. And that's really the focus of the company, and our technology is really providing that opportunity that every patient that walks through the door, whether it's at a comprehensive cancer center, whether it's at a community hospital, or an integrated delivery network, we want to provide the capabilities that any patient has the opportunity to, get involved and get enrolled onto a trial, because that could have a big impact on their treatment. And then, it's a very large problem for biopharma and biotech sponsors. So when we created the company, it's something that we really wanted to focus in on, is that big problem, but also having an impact on patients' lives.
So when you were talking about what Deep Lens does now and the big problem that you're trying to solve for, how did you arrive at that problem? What brought you to realizing you needed to start a business to solve that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I would say, even when I was given an introduction about myself, it was really, throughout my career, whether it was at Cardinal Health, Nationwide Children's, Signet, any of those experiences, it had really had a lot of opportunities around clinical research and, really looking at that collaboration between the providers and drug makers, so biopharma, biotech folks. And it kept coming back to this challenge, this problem of, we're not able to either find enough sites with, a certain patient population that we're looking for, or, we do have sites and, they're challenged with resources, sometimes lack of technology or infrastructure. So, throughout those years of working in the space, I feel like the problem kept hitting me in the face, that there's just this continued challenge, both with the providers as well as those sponsoring clinical trials of really getting a patient that opportunity to get on a trial. So it wasn't just one experience, Heather. It actually was a culmination of all my opportunities in my career. It continued to surface. So that's really what brought about this idea, really, around Deep Lens, as well as, with my co-founders, really looking at this hypothesis of, wow, if we can provide a technology platform in supporting service and process to, really get what we refer to as get the furthest upstream, for when that patient gets the diagnosis, starting to track and identify and match based upon trial criteria, so that the health system, and more importantly, that patient, it doesn't fall through the cracks or miss that opportunity to, potentially get a life-saving treatment.
So as you're talking about things like the care team and all those different constituents that need your product, how have you expanded or changed your offering or your direction to account for that?
Yeah. I think the term that you use there is expand. And I think that's exactly right. So when we started the company, we came in with that hypothesis that, we really wanted to try to get the furthest upstream to diagnosis. And based upon that hypothesis, we looked at, okay, part of that care team, what discipline or, medical professional is involved with diagnosis? Well, pathology. And that, pathologists I worked with, a number of years when I was at Nationwide Children's Hospital, and grew to really appreciate the role of a pathologist in the entire discipline. They get characterized as, they sit behind the scenes, they don't meet with patients. But the effort and the involvement that pathologists have from that point of diagnosis, even through their entire treatment plan, is really significant. So, the technology that we licensed from Nationwide Children's Hospital really out of the box was a digital pathology workflow solution, which I think gave us a significant head start on really realizing or proving out our hypothesis. So then as we continued to really advance and grow, what we found is not only the pathologist, but when we looked at that critical, the critical care plan and the individuals that are involved from the point of diagnosis, going through and identifying them for a trial, then getting them on a trial and their treatment, that allowed us to identify critical other individuals throughout that critical path. And that, that led us to clinical research coordinators, nurse navigators, the oncologists. So, we were fortunate to have, a network, and even the ability to continue to expand and really, I'll say, dive deeper into that care team and those members to expand the features, to really realize the goal of really being the optimal way to make sure patients don't fall through the cracks, that everyone has that opportunity.
So we talk a lot here about how difficult entrepreneurship is. Can you talk a little bit about what sacrifices you've had to make as an entrepreneur? Maybe what do you wish you would have known before you dove into this?
I don't think we have enough time for me to go through that entire list, Heather, but I think for everyone, the sacrifices can be different, whether you're a first-time entrepreneur or if you're a serial entrepreneur. Those scenarios can be different, but I would say the main one that I think is like I wish I would have known more is just expectation management. And I think it's one of the, again, there's so many factors that come into play with your question, but when I think about it, it's expectation management. And, having understood that just in a greater depth, and just knowing it up front. And I say that because, in a role of an executive, a CEO, you're managing expectations in so many different ways, right? So it's your board of directors, it's your investors, it's your clients, it's your employees, and expectations of yourself. So that is when I think of, what I would have liked to know more about is just, lessons learned, experiences, how to deal with managing expectations. I think sacrifices, everybody's story is a little bit different. But you talk about time. There you don't have a lot of free time, and work-life balance and aspects like that. There's that, being able to manage your priorities, and understanding that you still do want a work-life balance. But rolling up your sleeves and hard work and, those types of sacrifices that, a lot of groups talk about and books have been written about, they really do hold true. I think when you're an entrepreneur coming into this game, you hear a lot about that. But I think just, going through trainings and hearing it, I don't know that there's a great way to prepare you sometimes for the breadth and depth of that. But I do think it's still something that, looking back, having a better understanding of just expectation management and techniques of that, I'm continuing to mature in that aspect even today.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's hard to just say great advice about that.
Right.
You have to really internalize that.
Absolutely.
We do have a question from
Sure.
Joseph. What are the key steps and time frame to get market validation for a biomed MVP, minimally viable product?
Sure. It's a great question. I think there comes with a lot of details with, what type of product that is. And, for us, some of the technology that we exclusively licensed, we already knew that it worked, right? There was already an aspect of an MVP and, product market fit. But what I will say is there's no specific time frame that I would give Joseph asking the question. What I would say is that framework that you put in place to really identify what you define as product market fit, and being extremely prepared up front in that framework and plan to prove out your product is significant. If you don't go in with a plan, whatever time frames you think you might have, you could double or triple those. So I think, for, entrepreneurs on the phone, that product market fit is significant. And I say that right now, even with Deep Lens, because we've expanded the features and functionality and even the end user profiles. So even your definition of product market fit can expand even based upon your user base and feature base. But I think the key that I'm trying to really get across is you don't have a product if your market doesn't want it, right? So I think it's very, very important to step outside what you think as a founder, or take a step outside of what you think in your own walls of your company, and really get out in the market, do your surveys. And I'm going back to that framework to really understand, are you solving, do you have a solution that is solving a problem that exists? And then how does that equal into the market for your product? So I think it's very, very important up front, even in your planning as early as possible, to put that framework together and plan for product market fit.
Yeah. So we did receive another question,
Yeah.
but I'm going to put that on a sign somewhere. You don't have a product if you don't have a market.
Well, I mean, listen, I think we all think we have great ideas. right? And I think, and a lot of times these things do start with an idea, but it is a crucial aspect. And even some of the learnings that I went through with Rev One, that is very critical up front, and often that doesn't stop. I think that's another takeaway that I would try to leave the group with today, is it doesn't stop. As you continue to expand, you really want to have a voice of your market, to see where things are going as well, and really keep your finger on the pulse.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And thank you for the question, Joseph. Everyone,
yes, thank you.
You can type in your question into the Q&A at the bottom or in the chat. And we're gonna do some question time at the end, but we'll also be doing it throughout this conversation. So one more question. Somebody's asking some really detailed questions. Can you explain who your customers are and how did you decide your price point and workflow?
Yeah. In essence, that's, and I may need your help to go back through that. But I'll start with who our customer. It's in our model, and this is a good opportunity to explain our business model. So it is a little unique, especially in this space. So when I look at our customer, it really is the biopharma, biotech group, those that are sponsoring the trials. And the reason why I give that answer is because they're the ones that we charge. And in our business model, it's two-sided. And I say that because we actually take our entire platform, and we give it to the hospitals, the cancer centers, the integrated delivery networks, the community hospitals and clinics. So we have more of a freemium model where, a big part of when we started this company, what we didn't want to do was really try to go into, I'll say, hospital systems in the groups that I just talked about, the providers, where financially they're already having a burden financially. And there's plenty of statistics out there that say it. And even in the time we're in right now with the pandemic, even more so. So we didn't want to go in and try to squeeze additional dollars potentially from a market that's already strapped. So we looked at the biopharma market and where the dollars, I would say, were more in existence. So it's a two-sided problem that we're solving. But when you get down to it, is we provide our software to the providers to not, to take away any burden financially, and then we charge the biopharma, biotech folks. And in that charging, to answer another part of the question was, how do we figure out that price point? Well, we did a lot of research looking at what we would consider competitors and looking at how they charge. I will also say we are very lucky within our company to have members that have built products for the clients, biotech, biopharma, have even worked on the other side of receiving technology. So there was a good understanding of just price points that we looked at, but we would validate that. So very early on, we would hold our own, customer advisory calls, just to understand that, hey, are we in the ballpark? Does this type of model work for you? If we have this type of subscription, does that make sense? So again, it comes back to doing your homework, and in providing, the communication mechanisms to even when you're flushing this out, right? To iterate. That's something that I would also say, we're a software technology company. We have an agile methodology, which is very iterative. But what I would also tell folks is you need to be iterative as a business, and constantly ask yourself those questions, ask your clients those questions. I think that's very important in figuring out the price point. So we did our homework, and we had access to those folks, and also looked at the competition. Was there a third part in there that I didn't touch on?
The workflow of the product. How do you fit into
Huge.
the current workflow?
Huge. Just even thinking of, why folks, why our product's different or our differentiators. A lot of it does come down to our workflow. Could I sit here all day and talk about all the great technology behind the scenes and our AI techniques? And absolutely, because I love it. But I think what we have done a fantastic job in that process is really looking at the experience, right? Looking at the experience of a user based upon their persona, whether they're a nurse navigator, whether they're a clinical research coordinator, an oncologist, and in spending not just an hour with one of them, but spending several hours and putting even just rough designs in front of them and getting a reaction. So we spent a lot of time and continue to, right, in refining that workflow, because I think it is one of our bigger differentiators, because folks want to use it.
Right.
And that workflow is significant to even map to how the efficiencies and how it improves their work on both sides of our approach with providers and pharma folks. Hopefully that answered the questions.
Yeah, I think that was a really detailed answer. So thank you. And thank you for the question, Tom.
Yes, thank you.
Another question that came in was, what issues or opportunities has the COVID-19 pandemic created for Deep Lens? Did this create challenges to stay on your course?
It's all the above. So, and to give you a little more detail to that, the challenges, there's a lot related to the challenges. But I think, one of the challenges was, wow, hospital systems that are running clinical trials, a majority of those folks had to look at their own resources to focus on, the pandemic, and shift resources within hospitals to focus on taking care of those individuals that are, coming through their doors. And, part of that resource allocation really led to suspension of clinical trials. So, short answer is, wasn't necessarily a priority, right? So that presented itself a challenge, because with that, with the focus over here, it didn't really become a priority as far as whether we were moving deals through the pipeline, you name it. That presented itself a big challenge. And then on the other side with the pharma folks, they were going through the same process, right? Every day on phone calls, what's this clinical trial look like? Are we going to run in our portfolio? Are we actually going to push these new trials out? So, for the most part, everything went on hold, right? And that presented itself just a challenge of uncertainty for us and many others. So I think it's still somewhat of a challenge. I think from a positive aspect during the pandemic is it has really brought, I'll say, telemedicine, telework, going digital to the forefront, and hospital systems, integrated delivery networks, community groups have had to look creatively, right, on what solutions out there during these times can it help facilitate, and is it an opportunity to not suspend and continue to be productive? And I think that's where, fortunately, we had constructed our technology in a way that could help in that process. So I think that was a benefit that we've seen. The second too is knowing that we have part of that care team is the pathologist. For many years, the restrictions on pathologists moving more to a digital solution, FDA is heavily involved in that process. And during this time period, I'll say there was a waiver created, and FDA somewhat relaxed its restrictions to allow pathologists to shift to digital and being able to do case review and, remote diagnosis from outside the hospital setting. And that was something we were, already equipped to do. So that combination, I think, did have some benefits. It's tough to speak about benefits in a time like this. But I think with those challenges, it has brought about a new way to think about, new solutions, and new, standard operating procedures, to really help facilitate that type of effort.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Challenges to an entrepreneur are just, in fact, opportunities in disguise.
Yeah, that is well said.
So we're getting a lot of questions about the AI aspect of this.
Yeah.
This is something that we promoted when we were talking about this upcoming event. So as I said, there's a few different questions around the topic of the AI. So can you speak to how did you realize you needed AI? How has that evolved? How has the adoption been for that? Is it a critical piece of your product? Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. And I'll kind of answer your first part. It is critical to our product. And I say that with what I still believe is a strong differentiator for us is it is the technology and the AI, but it's not just a black box. Because I think they're still in our market, even though we hear AI pretty often, there are still some, especially in healthcare, that a machine's going to do a diagnosis. So there is still that fear factor, I would say, that continues, just with the advancements in the space. I think there's a lot of opportunities to, kind of get us away from thinking that can't, that's not a reality anymore. But I think for us, it's a combination of, we talked about the workflow. So it is the workflow. And then we actually take our AI, and I'll talk about that here in a second, but it's baked into that workflow. So we're putting it to good use and at the fingertips. But I also think it's our process and our approach. So we're a big believer in more of the augmented intelligence. So that A and AI is more of that augmented intelligence, because we still believe there's significant value in the medical professionals. So it's a combination of the machine and the medical professional that's working with the AI. So we're big believers in that, and it's also a contributing aspect into how we constructed the workflow. We even utilize our own resources. So when we do an implementation, it's not just here's your black box and we hope the computer provides you all your great results, but it's utilizing the advanced AI techniques in the workflow, and we also augment that with our own personnel to even help support the resource challenges that hospitals and the providers face. So it's that combination of still the knowledge worker, right? And then the AI and workflow, the technology, and then the supporting process. And we do believe that is I'll say, winning ingredients to the solution to solve these challenges. So I was just going to say that the AI piece, we have different flavors. That's how I describe it, as AI. We have more computer vision techniques that we use on in the pathology component with the whole slide images, where we can find specific features or train it to really try to mimic what those professionals do in the pathology discipline. What we also do is even in the workflow. So in the workflow, we have robotic process automation, so RPAs. And again, that came back to some questions earlier where we spent a lot of time looking at those, throughout getting a patient from diagnosis through that process of identifying them for, matching them for a trial and then enrolling them. There's a lot of repetitive tasks and time sensitive tasks. So we really prioritized our RPAs there to speed up that process. So there's a flavor of AI in there related to more of our robotic process automation and just the overarching machine learning. So with our platform, it's constantly as data flows in, it's constantly trying to look at patients and their characteristics and match them to a trial. So I'll just share that with the group. It's not just one technique, but there's multiple focused within our technology stack.
So kind of veering off in a different direction, but as you're talking about all of these very specialized technologies and the care teams that are highly educated people, how are you hiring? How are you recruiting this very unique set of talents for your business?
Yeah. Oh, great question.
That was Lisa's question, not mine.
Thank you, Lisa. Lisa, that was a great question. And kind of leading into my answer, those that are on this call that are thinking of starting a business or you're in the process, or even veterans would probably support my statement here. I believe team is everything. So I think, having the talent that surrounds you, and talent that, you can look for in your job description, but talent that comes in with a passion about what you're trying to do is significant. And I think we are very lucky here in Columbus, Ohio, with a talent pool that, I would argue second to none. But it's, looking at those characteristics, whether it is, robotic process automation, computer vision, across the board, full stack developers, you name it. I think we're very lucky here in Columbus, or just even in Ohio, right? We have just so many different companies here, and then universities that are spinning out great talent. So, the pool that we have access to, I think is fantastic. And then when you look at what problems that we are, Deep Lens is trying to solve, you couple those two things, it's really been excellent to see the team that we've been able to build here in Central Ohio. And, we would not be where we are at today without every single member within Deep Lens, those team members. So it is highly critical that you build a significant team around you, for sure.
That I would agree with that wholeheartedly. We've got a couple questions about your response to product validation. So really, can you dive more into your process of surveying and validation efforts, and how you made sure that your IP was safe as you were doing all of this?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I think, that this speaks to even, even my co-founders, my partners, having both of them having done this in their history. One of the things that we did is we established a product team from day one, and individuals that come in every day looking at, where are we going with the product, setting up advisory groups, building that network of individuals, whether it's pathologists, that whole care team, and consistently and constantly as we iterate, having that opportunity to have those in-depth conversations. And listen, I encourage everyone to continue to do that even after you have your MVP and your next iterations. I think it's extremely important that you keep your finger on the pulse. Technology is flying right now. There's new techniques, and I could talk all day about that. So it's important that you're hearing firsthand often. So again, going back, we constructed from day one knowing that we were going to have a product focused team, and it's not just developers, right? It's individuals that are focused on the details, building out that product roadmap, feature lists. So I think it's highly critical. And I would suggest you do that day one, and don't wait. So I think that's been a big advantage for us, throughout that entire life cycle.
So given the pandemic and the world we're living in now, and the advent of telework, where do you see your startup going in the future? How do you manage your team remotely while continuing to scale your business?
Yeah, it's again another good question. I think just with the pandemic, I think overall, Heather, I think things are going to get very interesting with companies seeing more advantages to telework, and also I don't want to say telework is the end all be all, because I think there's still aspects of running a business that you can't always do remotely. But what I will say is, again, I was lucky to have a team that thought about, our infrastructure, our policies, our procedures. And it also relates to the types of people that you hire. Telework might not be for everyone. So I think, from a deep lens standpoint, I think we were already set up, from my perspective, to succeed in an environment like we've been presented with. And we've been extremely productive with, iterations of our product, advancement of our use cases, sales, you name it. We've been very, very productive. But those are things that, again, you got to be proactive in that aspect. And I think, again, I attribute that to, my leaders around me and the people that we've hired to put those things in place. And kind of going forward, Heather, I think, even the way that we've constructed the technology itself, the workflows, it actually lends itself that with decisions being made, that if there's going to be more remote standards, we're already set up to do it. And I think we can actually even help in the facilitation of SOPs, and even how do we think it would be best to utilize our technology in maybe a new environment that decision makers are looking to implement, whether you're on the provider or the pharma side. So I think we're well positioned. I do. And I think we have just the mindset, the climate, the culture within Deep Lens to adapt and overcome any of those challenges that we're faced with, because of our thought process up front and really what we plan.
Thank you for that answer. So Andrew has a question. He says, what surprised you about raising venture capital? What did you learn along that journey?
Yeah. It's not easy, and I will say, this is something that I'll kind of relate to even going back when I was setting up this company. And this is again for many of you listening, I didn't have an experience in that, and that's something too. When I was looking at building this team, I didn't do that. So, I had to look myself in the mirror and say, here's my core competencies, and here are things that I just don't know or never done it or not good at. And that's where, my co-founders came into play. And, I was lucky enough to have relationships with co-founders that were very successful at raising dollars. And then, even taking those dollars and operationalizing them. So, I was very fortunate. It's not easy. Whatever you hear, it's true. And I will also say too, some of it's opportunistic, some of it's luck, but you make your luck, right? And I think that is something where, and kudos to Rev One. So I'll just, that Rev One is the first place that I went to when I, thought about starting this company. And it's something that, in essence, matured with me in that discussion process. So I think it's, the keys to that is, trying to partner and align yourself with folks that have been there, done that, that also can consult you along the journey. Because I think your venture partners, your investors are critical, and it's not just the dollars, right? The dollars are significant, right? We know that. But I think it's those investors that appreciate the problem that you're trying to overcome. They can also come to the table and sit down with you and strategize, and help you along the way. So those are things that I want to make sure the group also understand, that yes, there's significant challenges, I believe, in raising dollars and knowing the right dollars, and the right investors. And just the whole process itself is, there's a lot to it. So I think, education, asking people that have been there, done that, but really surrounding yourself with the know-how. And, I did that with, my co-founders, and then very early on working with a partner like Rev One, that could walk me through the process and understand what works, what doesn't work. So I think, that whole aspect about the right dollars, it's challenging, right? Especially when you're raising money. But I do think it's very important, really more so just surround yourself with people that have been there and have done that, and educate yourself along the way. But yeah, I still think there's a little bit of luck involved. But if you find the right people, you have the right story, you're showing the team and how you can raise, get that return. I think there's a lot of those different aspects, and practice your pitch over and over and over.
Here. I second that. You've talked a lot about your co-founders. Can you give advice for others that are considering bringing on a co-founder?
Yeah, no, for me, I didn't spend a lot of time. I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about, bringing on co-founders. I really didn't, Heather. It's because as I've matured, I had that opportunity to take a step back and really look at, hey, if I'm going to leave my current job and go do this new thing, right? My mentality is I'm going to succeed, right? And if I'm going to succeed, what are those key attributes that I have to have to succeed? And that was just that real conversation that I had to do with myself, and raising money and building great products, not just in a research environment, but taking them commercial. Those were aspects that I knew that I didn't have. And that's when I reached out to two individuals that, one, I have a lot of trust for, and two, I knew that they had the skill set that could complement what I could bring to the table. So it was pretty easy for me to make that decision, to be frank.
So we have a question from Christy.
Yes.
What have you learned about yourself along the way? What did you realize that you're good at versus maybe not so good at or needed to learn?
Yeah. Some of it I knew, coming in, just kind of going through the whole, I'll say, co-founder exercise. I think the aspect when we really look at, building out models and pricing structures, and that was not my strength. It really wasn't. Do I understand it? Yes. Could I contribute? Sure. But again, that's where, my two co-founders, both of them, have built out, those mathematical formulas and models, and with my background, I would contribute to that process. And I think that's where it was very helpful. And I learned a lot along the way, and continue to do so. So that's one. And I think the second is, you have to continue to, I'll say, accept that you don't know everything. And that's something that I see, every day through all of these phases, as a startup. And you have to have the ability to sit and listen, and that can be tough at times. But having the ability to listen to your co-founders, listen to your leadership group, across and down, listen to the customers, listen to your board. It's the ability to consume all that information. And my team would probably tell you, I talk a lot about educated decisions, right? Because anybody can make a decision, but I'm a big believer in, you have to make an educated decision, and in really gathering that input, That's something that I continue to work on and grow. So I think that's a significant, it's a significant attribute, I believe, that any of you, starting a business is try to accept that you don't have all the answers, and really look at garnering as much feedback as possible, and then using that tight knit group around you to decipher all that information, again, to make that educated decision.
So you've talked about failing fast a little bit.
Yeah.
And can you share any lessons learned from a moment of failure?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I think some of the aspects very early on, around just the pure digital pathology focus. Again, we had thoughts and ideas and a hypothesis there, where we sent out surveys, we tried out even other aspects, even I'll say bolt-on solutions that made sense, at the time, that we just finally said, this isn't making sense, right? Why are we doing this? Why are we spending the time and energy there? And I think what that also comes back to, Heather, is focus. And I will tell, if there's anything to take away today, if you're, wherever you're at in the process of being an entrepreneur, that focus aspect is going, it's one of the biggest challenges. There's going to be a lot of opportunities that you believe exist. There's a lot of new shiny objects and chasing opportunities. I think one of the things that we tried to build within our culture and even our process is this exercise of a true north, or a North Star. And again, I would encourage everyone to do it, because it's not just as co-founders, it's co-founders across down, right? Board of directors should know your true north. All employees should know your true north. And again, being able to map decisions, features, you name it, you have to be able to map that to your true north. And if it doesn't map, you have to find that ability to say, no, we're not going to do it. And that's not always easy. And, we found that out, early on. But I think it also attributed to a lot of the great, features and technology, and in essence, our overall model for our business. So, we grew from that.
So we've got one really specific question from Jeff. He says, from Nathan. Who do you think leads in AI, Google or Microsoft?
Oh, wow. I think competition is good. That'll be my answer. Listen, they both have an excellent, they have an excellent number of members and teams and where they're trying to focus. And I think pushing each other, and then even other solutions in the market. When I even look at our competitors, understanding what your competitors are doing and where they're going, and I'll say that level of competition, I think, is very good. So I don't know that I would choose one over the other, but I think both of them are doing some great things in the market, even in healthcare. So again, I'll say they're both good, and let's keep up the competition.
I appreciate your diplomatic answer. So getting another question, this one is actually from Jeff. So how is tech expertise balanced with the medical and the business expertise? I'm assuming he means on your team.
Yeah, no, that I'll tell you what, I appreciate that question. And again, it also comes back to, I'll say my background, TJ's background, the co-founder, our chief scientific officer, Simon, my other co-founder, his background. All three of us have been in the technology field, and we've also worked in the healthcare and life sciences verticals. So I do think that is, I don't want to say you have to have it, but I think it's pretty significant to be able to combine both the technical chops, as well as especially the domain that you're working in or selling into. Having both those dynamics, I do think it, combining both of those is great. I won't say it's easy. Finding individuals, full stack developers, you name it, that has the technical chops and they know exactly what a clinical research leader is doing, or understand the dynamics of inclusion-exclusion criteria, right? There's so many details, and the space that we're in is growing rapidly. It's very dynamic, and it's tough, right? There's a lot going on, especially even that we have two different groups that we're satisfying. But I do think we've been really successful. I'll say from leadership down and across, finding individuals that do have those backgrounds that can prove the technical, have the technical acumen, but also have the vernacular to understand, requirements as they come in from the different care team members. So I do think it's important, and we've been lucky there.
So we have about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to ask one last question from the audience. So Matt asks, can you quickly talk about how you incorporate the patient into the clinical trial selection process? You talked a little bit about your true north before, so I know that the patient is a piece of that. So can you talk about
it's
that?
It's the central piece. And I think when you look at our true north and decision making, and even as we look at participants in the advisory or anything that we're constructing within where we're getting feedback, the patient advocate is absolutely forefront in those discussions, because that is, no matter what problems we talk about in our what we're trying to solve and in our solution, it is patient centric. And I think it's the problems that we are solving throughout that process. In the end, it's the patient that benefits, right? So no matter what, if we're increasing efficiencies in the provider setting, or with our solution, we're actually able for a clinical trial to finish 2 months sooner. Guess who benefits? The patient. That's exactly right. So again, with that true north and what I say about our decision making, it's always with the patient in mind, even our data model, right? So it's very patient centric, and it's looking at those opportunities and understanding challenges, even from their view that they faced, where they maybe didn't get offered a clinical trial, and why, where in their care plan could a trial been identified? Because even understanding that perspective also lends itself into our workflow, even the AI, techniques that we're building. So it's, long-winded, it's forefront, it's at the center.
Well, thank you, Dave, for all of the great insights that you gave today about your business, about entrepreneurship, and about your product.
It was great. Yeah, I had a lot of fun, and hopefully those that participated today, hopefully you could take a couple nuggets away from our hour we spent today. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
And there were some really great questions from the audience, and we really appreciate
Absolutely.
that. So we're going to be doing this again, another founder story, virtually in July. So look out for an invitation for that. And I'd also just like to give a quick shout out about the, if you can see my screen, about the Start Fund. This is started by entrepreneurs in Columbus, the first startup-led nonprofit organization to give back to the Columbus community. And we've raised over $59,000 to give grants to nonprofits in the Columbus community, including Franklinton Farms, Freedom a la carte, the Overwatch partnership. So if everyone on this call gave just $20, we'd be able to reach our goal this year to give back to the community. So please, thank you again, Dave.
Thank you.
And we hope to see all of you back for our next event in July.
Great. Thanks again, Heather. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.